Good morning. This is your Professor Boreas Sachs. It is one of the hottest summer days so far this year, but after finishing this talk, I am off to the White Plains Farmers Market. When I enter our class discussion board, there are so many ideas on so many topics. I have a feeling of glorious chaos, and it's great, even if it can be a little scary, because, as the old alchemists understood, chaos is the beginning of the transformations that lead ultimately to wisdom. And that leads us back to fairy tales. No matter how hackneyed, unrealistic, or unsophisticated people may say it is, I am absolutely thrilled when Cinderella and the prince get married and live happily ever after. But what about the cruel punishments in fairy tales? What about the stepsisters in the version of Cinderella by Grimm who have their eyes pecked out? What about the wicked witch in Hansel and Gretel who is pushed into a hot oven and becomes a cake? Or the wicked queen in Snow White who must put on iron shoes, red-hot shoes, and dance in them until she dies? What about all of the references to cannibalism, incest, immolation, and so on? The question is not just whether such stories are suitable for children. The question is how we can ever imagine that they could be suitable. After all, if such material was presented in a realistic novel or movie, there wouldn't be any controversy. We wouldn't need to think half a second before deciding that it was completely inappropriate. Well, this is a long-standing controversy, and I certainly won't try to resolve it now. But I can offer at least one explanation why violence seems more acceptable in fairy tales. Fairy tales are written in an abstract style where everything, absolutely everything, is taken to extremes. Beautiful and ugly, young and old, good and evil, rewards and punishments, light and dark, etc., etc. Even children, I believe, generally understand that fairy tales are not a realistic representation of the world. And this style is not absolutely unique to fairy tales. In fact, you may also find it in alchemical writings. Among the similarities between the two are the following. Both conceive life as a quest. Both center around transformations, both personal and material. Both have a style that is one-dimensional. Both center on extremes that are ultimately reconciled. Both were developed in the early modern period against a background of religious wars and persecutions. Both are very moralistic. Both tend to have happy endings. Alchemy was a discipline based on the aspiration to transformations, a science from which our chemistry originally derived. It was founded on the assumption of the ultimate unity of the spiritual and material worlds. The great work of the alchemists was to transform base metals into gold through several stages of purification, which corresponded to the cleansing of the soul, the happily ever after. The alchemists, to avoid their works being abused and to escape persecution, described what they did in terms of elaborate allegories which might involve, say, the incestuous coupling of Venus and Mars to describe the smelting of copper and iron. Here is an illustration from Salamantris Moson to illustrate an esoteric text of the 4th century Greek alchemist Zosimo. A man with a dark face dismembers another man, whose body turns white as salt and whose head turns into gold. The black man says, "I have killed you so that you may have overflowing life, but your head I will hide so that the world may not see you." Alchemy centers more on material transformations, while fairy tales center more on personal ones, specifically the transformations involved in growing up. But in both cases, the material and physical worlds are ultimately understood as one. For the alchemists, tales of transformation such as those found in Ovid were very important. This tale illustrates a tale of Ovid, of an ancient sage who wished to regenerate himself. He should cause himself to be divided up and boiled until completely cooked. Then the limbs would reunite and rejuvenate most powerfully. Alchemists believed these changes corresponded to physical processes, and that the metals literally suffered on their way to perfection. But the sage in this picture is obviously not particularly bothered by being cooked. The raven of chaos takes flight, while the dove of the spirit lands on his head. Any attempt to describe the hermetic symbolism in fairy tales would be a formidable task, and one that I will certainly not undertake here. For now, my only point is that what makes the violence in fairy tales seem perhaps acceptable, and the wonderful endings seem perhaps believable, is a style that is highly distinctive but not absolutely unique, a style that developed largely during times of religious wars and persecutions, and one which features elaborate allegories and dramatic contrasts. You are invited to view more pictures at the link on your screen. That's all for now. I'm off to the farmer's market. See you in class.